I stared at my phone, my hands trembling as the video played again. The grainy footage showed my husband Zach in a dimly lit room, his arms wrapped around a woman who was definitely not me. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched them kiss passionately, their bodies intertwined. Bile rose in my throat, and I fought the urge to vomit. How could he do this to me? To our marriage? After 20 years together, I thought we were happy, that we had something special. But this video proved that everything I believed was a lie. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. I needed to be strong, to think clearly about my next move. The video had been sent anonymously, with no explanation or context. Part of me wanted to confront Zach immediately, to demand answers and unleash the fury building inside me. But a smaller, more rational voice urged caution. I needed proof, evidence that would hold up in court if it came to that. With shaking fingers, I dialed the number of a private investigator I'd heard good things about. If Zach was cheating, I needed to know the full extent of his betrayal before I made my next move. The investigator answered on the third ring, and I steeled myself. "Hello, I need your help," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I believe my husband is having an affair, and I want you to find out everything." As I hung up the phone, a sense of determination washed over me. Zach had made his choices, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. I would not be the meek, forgiving wife, not this time. He had shattered my trust, and for that he would pay. A week later, I met with the private investigator in a nondescript cafe downtown. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table, his expression grim. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Bennett," he said solemnly. "The evidence is substantial." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and began sifting through the contents. Photographs, bank statements, even a detailed timeline of my husband's sordid affair. The woman in the photos was young, probably in her early 30s, with long blonde hair and a slender figure. Her name was Amber, and she worked as a marketing executive at the same company as Zach. As I flipped through the damning images, each one a fresh knife to my heart, the full extent of Zach's betrayal became painfully clear. This wasn't a one-time mistake or a fleeting indiscretion. It was a full-blown, long-term affair that had been going on for over a year. Worse still, the bank statements showed that Zach had been using company funds to finance his trysts with Amber, taking her on luxurious trips and lavishing her with expensive gifts. It was embezzlement, plain and simple. "How could he do this?" I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "After everything we've been through together, how could he throw it all away for her?" The investigator shook his head grimly. "I'm afraid the evidence speaks for itself, Mrs. Bennett. Your husband has been leading a double life, and he's been using your family's money to fund it." Anger surged through me, hot and consuming. Zach had not only cheated on me, but he'd also stolen from the company that employed him, the company that provided for our family. It was a betrayal on every level, and in that moment I knew I could never forgive him. "Thank you for your work," I said, rising from my seat. "I'll be sure to compensate you for your efforts, and please call me Sylvia." As I left the cafe, clutching the envelope of evidence like a lifeline, I felt a sense of grim determination settle over me. Zach had made his choices, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. I would see to it personally. That night, as Zach slept peacefully beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing, I made a call to a divorce lawyer. It was time to end this sham of a marriage and make Zach pay for his sins, both financially and emotionally. He would lose everything, his job, his assets, his reputation. And when he had nothing left, maybe then he would understand the depth of his betrayal. I was done being the meek, forgiving wife. From now on, I would be the architect of Zach's downfall, and he would reap the bitter harvest he had sown. The next morning, I made an appointment with a divorce lawyer named Samantha Wells. Her office was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. "Please have a seat," she said, gesturing to the plush leather chairs across from her desk. "Now, why don't you tell me a little bit about your situation?" I took a deep breath and launched into the sordid tale of Zach's betrayal, laying out the evidence the private investigator had gathered, the photos, the bank statements, the timeline of his affair with Amber. As I spoke, Samantha's expression grew increasingly grave. "I see," she said when I had finished, And I take it you wish to proceed with divorce proceedings? Absolutely, I replied, my voice steely with resolve. That lying, cheating bastard has taken everything from me. My trust, my dignity, my sense of self-worth. It's time he paid the price. Samantha nodded, making a few notes on her legal pad. Understandable. Given the evidence of his infidelity and financial misdeeds, I believe we have a very strong case. We can pursue not only the dissolution of your marriage, but also seek damages for his embezzlement activities. A vindictive smile curved my lips. Good. I want to take him for everything he's worth. Over the next few weeks, Samantha and I worked tirelessly to build an airtight case against Zach. I provided her with every shred of evidence I had, determined to leave no stone unturned. Meanwhile, I made preparations to move out of our home, packing up my belongings and securing a small apartment across town. The day I left was one of the most difficult of my life. Zach was at work, thankfully, so I didn't have to face him. But as I loaded the last box into my car, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of loss and grief. This was the home we had built together, the place where we were supposed to grow old side by side. Now it was nothing but a painful reminder of his betrayal. As I drove away, tears streamed down my cheeks. But beneath the sorrow, a steely resolve burned within me. Zach had made his choices, and now he would face the consequences, no matter how much it hurt me in the process. A few days later, I received a frantic call from Zach. Sylvia, where are you? He demanded, his voice tinged with panic. Your stuff is gone, and you're not answering your phone. What's going on? I took a deep, steadying breath before responding. I know about Amber, Zach. I know everything. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Sylvia, I can explain. Save it, I snapped. I've already retained a lawyer and divorce proceedings are underway. You'll be hearing from her soon. Divorce? Sylvia, please, let's talk about this. I made a mistake, but I love you. We can work through this, I swear. I let out a bitter laugh. Work through it? Zach, you've been cheating on me for over a year and embezzling from your company to fund your little trysts. There's no coming back from that. But I'll end things with Amber. I swear, she means nothing to me. You're the only one I want, Sylvia. Please, give me another chance. His pleas fell on deaf ears. It's too late for that, Zach. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. Goodbye. With that, I hung up the phone, severing the last remaining thread that bound us together. Zach had sealed his fate the moment he betrayed me, and now there was no turning back. The only thing left was to watch as his world crumbled around him, a punishment more than fitting for his crimes. In the days following my confrontation with Zach, my phone rang incessantly. Calls from his number would light up the screen at all hours, day and night, each one more desperate than the last. Sylvia, please pick up the phone. We need to talk about this. I'm begging you, give me another chance. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me. Where are you staying? Let me come over so we can discuss this like adults. I never answered, never gave him the satisfaction of a response. Each time his number flashed across my screen, a cold sense of satisfaction washed over me. Let him stew in his misery, I thought. Let him feel even a fraction of the pain and betrayal he had inflicted upon me. Meanwhile, the wheels of justice were turning. Samantha, my lawyer, had filed the paperwork for our divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and infidelity as the grounds. She had also taken the evidence of Zach's embezzlement activities to his employer, a multinational marketing firm where he had worked for nearly a decade. The fallout was swift and merciless. Within days, Zach was called into his boss's office and summarily fired, stripped of his position and all the perks that came with it. The company was ruthless in its pursuit of justice, determined to make an example of him and salvage their reputation. I'll never forget the day Zach showed up at my apartment, his eyes red-rimmed and his clothes disheveled. He pounded on the door, his fists leaving dents in the flimsy wood. Sylvia, open up! Please, we need to talk! Against my better judgment, I cracked the door open, keeping the security chain in place. Zach looked like a shell of his former self, his once handsome face haggard and drawn. What do you want, Zach? I asked, my voice flat and emotionless. They fired me, Sylvia, he said, his voice cracking with anguish. Because of what you did, because of the evidence you gave them, they fired me. How could you do this to me? I let out a bitter laugh. How could I do this to you? You're the one who cheated, Zach. You're the one who betrayed our marriage and stole from your employer. I'm simply making sure you face the consequences of your actions. Zach's face contorted with rage. You vindictive bitch, he spat. After everything we've been through, this is how you repay me? I met his gaze, unflinching. You brought this on yourself, Zach, and this is just the beginning. By the time I'm done with you, you'll have lost everything. Your job, your money, your precious little mistress. You'll be left with nothing but the wreckage of your own making. With that, I slammed the door in his face, cutting off his anguished cries. As I leaned back against the wall, my heart pounded in my chest, but a strange sense of calm washed over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I was finally in control of my own destiny. Zach's world was crumbling around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He had made his choices, and now he would reap what he had sown, a bitter harvest of pain, loss, and regret. And I would be there to watch it all unfold, savoring every moment of his downfall. A few weeks later, Zach called me again, his voice tinged with desperation. Sylvia, please, I'm begging you. We need to talk face to face. Give me one last chance to make things right. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near my apartment. When he arrived, I was struck by how haggard he looked. His once impeccable suit hung loosely on his frame, and his eyes were sunken and ringed with dark circles. Thank you for agreeing to see me, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful you're giving me a chance to explain myself. I remained silent, my expression impassive as I waited for him to continue. Zach took a deep breath. Sylvia, I've made some terrible mistakes, and I know that now. My affair with Amber was the biggest regret of my life, and I'll spend the rest of my days atoning for it. But please, you have to believe me when I say that she meant nothing to me. It was a moment of weakness, a lapse in judgment that spiraled out of control. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing my hand. I flinched at his touch, but didn't pull away. I still love you, Sylvia. You're the only woman I've ever truly loved. If you'll give me another chance, I swear on my life that I'll end things with Amber for good. We can go to counseling, rebuild our trust, start fresh. Just please, don't give up on us. His words hung in the air, thick with desperation and false promises. For a moment, a small part of me wavered, tempted by the idea of salvaging what was left of our marriage. But then I remembered the photos, the bank statements, the overwhelming evidence of his betrayal. Do you really expect me to believe you, Zach? I said, my voice low and steady. After everything you've done, all the lies and deceit, you think a few pretty words are going to make it all better? Zach's face fell, his eyes pleading. Sylvia, I'm telling you the truth. I'll do anything at all to make this right. Just tell me what you need from me. I leaned back in my seat, regarding him with a mixture of pity and contempt. What I need from you is to sign these. From my purse, I withdrew a thick stack of papers, the divorce papers Samantha had drawn up, outlining the terms of our separation. I slid them across the table, my heart hardening against the anguish in Zach's eyes. But Sylvia, please, we can work this out. We don't need to take such drastic measures. Read them, Zach. I said, my voice brooking no argument. Read them, and you'll see that I'm being more than fair. You'll get to keep a portion of your assets, your retirement fund, even the damn sports car you love so much. All I ask in return is that you grant me a clean break and stay the hell out of my life. Zach's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the legalese. With each passing moment, the reality of our situation seemed to sink in, the weight of his transgressions bearing down on him. I don't know what to say, he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. There's nothing left to say, Zach, I replied, rising from my seat. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. Sign the papers, and we can both move on with our lives. As I turned to leave, Zach's voice stopped me. I'm sorry, Sylvia, for everything. I paused, considering his words for a moment. Then, without turning back, I spoke the bitter truth. Sorry isn't good enough, Zach. Not anymore. The day of our divorce hearing, I arrived at the courthouse with Samantha by my side, a steely resolve burning in my chest. Zach was already there, seated at a table with his own lawyer, a slick, overpriced shark of a man who oozed arrogance. As I took my place across the aisle, Zach's gaze met mine, his eyes pleading one last time for mercy. But I hardened my heart against his silent entreaties, focusing instead on the task at hand, ensuring that he paid the ultimate price for his betrayal. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, wasted no time in getting down to business. "We're here today to settle the matter of the divorce between Sylvia and Zach Bennett," she announced, her voice carrying through the cavernous courtroom. "Mrs. Bennett, I understand you have evidence to present?" Samantha rose to her feet, a confident smile playing across her lips. "Yes, Your Honor. We have compiled a comprehensive dossier detailing Mr. Bennett's infidelity and legal financial activities." With practiced efficiency, she began laying out the evidence, the photos, the bank statements, the timelines and receipts that painted a damning portrait of Zach's misdeeds. As each new piece of proof was presented, I could see the color draining from Zach's face, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. When Samantha had finished, the judge turned her steely gaze on Zach and his lawyer. "Well, Mr. Bennett, what do you have to say in your defense?" Zach's lawyer cleared his throat, his bravado wavering in the face of such overwhelming evidence. "Your Honor, while my client's actions were undoubtedly regrettable, we believe that the proposed division of assets is grossly unfair and punitive in nature." The judge arched an eyebrow. "Unfair? From where I'm sitting, it seems that Mrs. Bennett is being more than generous, given the circumstances. Not only did your client engage in a long-term affair, but he also embezzled funds from his employer to finance his indiscretions. That's criminal behavior, Mr. Bennett." Zach's head hung low, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He knew, as well as I did, that there was no way to talk his way out of this one. The evidence was ironclad, his guilt undeniable. After a brief recess, the judge returned with her ruling. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, I am granting Mrs. N. Bennett's petition for divorce on the grounds of infidelity and financial misconduct," she declared, her voice ringing out like a death knell. "Furthermore, I am awarding her a significant portion of Mr. Bennett's assets and investments, as well as alimony payments to be determined at a later date." A vindictive thrill coursed through me as I watched Zach's world crumble before him. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when he would finally face the full consequences of his actions. As the judge banged her gavel, sealing our fate, I turned to look at Zach one last time. His eyes met mine, a maelstrom of emotions swirling in their depths: regret, anger, despair. In that moment, I knew that I had won, that my quest for vengeance had been achieved. But as I walked out of the courtroom, my head held high, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness amidst the triumph. This was the man I had once loved, the man I had vowed to spend my life with, and now our once unbreakable bond had been shattered beyond repair, all because of his selfish choices. Still, I knew that I had done the right thing. Zach had made his bed, and now he would have to lie in it, alone, bereft of everything he had once held dear. It was a harsh punishment, to be sure, but one that he had brought upon himself. As I stepped out into the crisp autumn air, a sense of closure washed over me. This chapter of my life was finally closed, and I could begin anew, unburdened by the weight of Zach's betrayal. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to face it head-on, stronger and more resilient than ever before. In the weeks and months that followed the divorce, I watched with a twisted sense of satisfaction as Zach's life unraveled before my eyes. The consequences of his actions had set in motion a chain reaction that would ultimately strip him of everything he held dear. First, there was the financial ruin. True to the judge's ruling, I had been awarded a sizable portion of Zach's assets, his investments, his savings, even his prized sports car. Overnight, he went from being a wealthy, respected businessman to a man teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. I'll never forget the day the movers came to clear out his belongings from our once shared home. As I watched from the window, Zach stood on the lawn, his face contorted with anguish, as his material possessions were loaded into the truck, piece by piece. "This isn't over, Sylvia," he shouted, his voice thick with rage. "You haven't seen the last of me." But his threats rang hollow, a desperate attempt to cling to the last vestiges of his former power and control. I simply turned away, letting his empty words dissipate into the crisp autumn air. Next came the social fallout. Word of Zach's indiscretions had spread like wildfire through our once tight-knit circle of friends and colleagues. Overnight, he became a pariah, shunned and ostracized by those who had once admired and respected him. I'll never forget the look on his face at our annual neighborhood barbecue, when couple after couple turned their backs on him, their expressions a mixture of disgust and pity. Zach had always been the life of the party, the charismatic center of attention. Now he was a mere specter, a cautionary tale of how far a man could fall when consumed by his own selfish desires. But perhaps the most devastating blow came when Amber, his former mistress, abandoned him. With Zach's money and resources depleted, she quickly lost interest, casting him aside like yesterday's garbage. "You're broke, Zach," she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt, "and a broke man is of no use to me." I happened to witness their final confrontation, watching from a distance as Amber delivered her parting words. The anguish on Zach's face was palpable, a raw and visceral pain that cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. In that moment, I almost felt a twinge of pity for the man who had once been my husband. Almost. But then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, the countless nights I had spent awake, wondering where I had gone wrong, what I had done to deserve such heartbreak. And any fleeting sympathy I might have felt evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This was the path Zach had chosen for himself, the bitter harvest he had sown through his own selfish actions. And now he would have to reap the consequences, no matter how painful or humiliating they might be. As the weeks turned into months, Zach's descent continued unabated. His once prestigious job was replaced by a series of menial, low-paying gigs, working as a cashier, a delivery driver, a night shift janitor. His expensive suits were traded for threadbare jeans and faded t-shirts. His designer watches and cufflinks sold off to pay the bills. Everywhere he went, the specter of his past transgressions followed, a constant reminder of the man he had once been and the depths to which he had fallen. And through it all, I watched from afar, a silent witness to his unraveling, savoring every moment of his well-deserved downfall. For Zach, it was a harsh and brutal lesson in the consequences of his actions, a karmic reckoning that stripped him of everything he had once held dear. And for me, it was a testament to the power of resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, justice could prevail, if one was willing to fight for it. As the years passed, the pain of Zach's betrayal gradually faded, replaced by a newfound sense of strength and independence. While he wallowed in the wreckage of his own making, I thrived, rebuilding my life from the ground up and emerging as a stronger, more resilient version of myself. I threw myself into my work, channeling my energy and determination into advancing my career. With Zach's dead weight no longer holding me back, I soared, earning promotion after promotion until I found myself at the helm of a major marketing firm, the very same company that had once employed my ex-husband. The irony wasn't lost on me as I settled into the plush corner office, surveying the sweeping city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. This was the pinnacle of success, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. And I had achieved it all on my own without the aid or support of a man. In those quiet moments, I couldn't help but wonder where Zach was, what he was doing to scrape by in the aftermath of his downfall. Part of me hoped that he had found some small measure of redemption, some way to claw his way back from the depths to which he had fallen. But a larger, more vindictive part relished the thought of him suffering, of being forced to confront the harsh realities of the life he had chosen. Occasionally, I would catch glimpses of him around town, a haggard, disheveled figure pushing a shopping cart full of recyclables, or hunched over a mop and bucket in the dingy backroom of some seedy establishment. Each time, a twisted sense of satisfaction would wash over me, a reminder that justice had been served, that he had received his due punishment for the sins he had committed. And yet, as the years wore on, that satisfaction gradually gave way to something else, a sense of closure, of having finally laid that chapter of my life to rest. The anger and bitterness that had once consumed me had been replaced by a quiet acceptance, an understanding that dwelling on the past would only serve to hold me back from embracing the future. So I let go, releasing the last lingering tendrils of resentment and moving forward with a renewed sense of purpose and clarity. I surrounded myself with a new circle of friends, people who knew and accepted me for who I was without the baggage of my failed marriage weighing me down. And in those rare moments when thoughts of Zach did creep in, I no longer felt the burning need for vengeance or retribution. Instead, I simply felt pity. Pity for the man who had squandered his potential, his future, all for the fleeting thrill of an illicit affair. As for me, I had emerged from the ashes of our marriage stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. I had stared down the depths of betrayal and despair, and I had not only survived, I had thrived. In the end, that was the greatest revenge of all, to live my life to the fullest, unburdened by the weight of Zach's transgressions, to wake up each morning with a sense of purpose and contentment, knowing that I had fought for my happiness and won. And if, by some cruel twist of fate, our paths were to cross again, I knew that I would greet him not with anger or bitterness, but with a sense of calm detachment. For in that moment, I would see him not as the man who had once held my heart in his hands, but as a cautionary tale, a living embodiment of the consequences that await those who let their selfish desires consume them. I would look at him, and I would feel nothing but pity. Pity for the man who had thrown it all away, and gratitude for the strength and resilience that had carried me through to the other side, scarred but unbroken, ready to embrace the next chapter of my life with open arms.